Welcome, family, to Kingdom Academy Podcast, a community of like-minded daughters of the King who love the Lord, abide by His word, and submit to kingdom help that is healing, equipping, launching, and prospering in business and ministry. I'm super excited to have Amanda Mick on today because her and I have been friends for a long time, but with a lot of space in between. So really, you're just going to be a fly on the wall in our catch-up session is kind of how it's going to go today. But I think you're going to really love it because she's pivoting in her business right now in a lot of amazing kinds of kingdom-focused ways. And we're just going to dive into all of that right now. So, okay, before we hit record, we were talking about the pivot you're making because originally you had this other big women's focused business that you were running, but now you're pivoting into a more focus on glorifying God in your business. So how did that come about?
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited to do this. I've been, obviously following your journey for a long time. So I love everything that you're putting out there. So I'm excited for today and this conversation. But I've made this really big shift. It's been a long time coming, honestly, probably 2 years ago. I was just watching the Lord do a lot of amazing things in my personal life. And that just really started to impact, obviously, my professional life. To keep it kind of short, my now husband dedicated his life to the Lord. But before that had happened, I'd been praying, I'd been on my knees, praying for that moment of salvation and just that surrender. I loved him dearly then, but I just knew that we couldn't, take our relationship any further if that didn't happen. And so I was just interceding for that. And when that day happened, I watched so many of my answered prayers. It was back to back things start getting answered. I kept this prayer journal that really stirred my faith. So I wrote down the day I prayed for it, and it would be very specific things. And then the Lord would answer that prayer, and just having a log of all my answered prayers just started to do something in me that was just unlike anything else that I had really ever experienced. I've been on this faith journey for a long time. I've made mistakes. I've fallen away, got back in. I've had this long journey with God, but this particular 2 years ago, something in me just changed. And so I felt this stirring of my faith personally. And then that's really all I wanted to talk about. And I've been coaching entrepreneurs for almost 9 years. And I've been running a female entrepreneur community for 8 years. But the community that I had, there was not really the freedom to discuss these things, right? Some of them were believers. That's kind of naturally who I attract, but it wasn't all who I attracted. And it wasn't the topic of conversation. And it wasn't the important things that we were talking about. We were talking about money and growth and strategy and stuff like that, which was great, but it just was missing the thing that my core was what I was wanting to discuss, the thing that I really wanted to shout from the mountaintops and say, everything's changing here. And so, it started with this personal thing. And I just kind of knew there was a seed planted 2 years ago. Hey, things are probably going to shift for you. This is, who you will serve someday will be the person, that you are now, the one who's wanting the shift. And so I've just kind of let God take the reins of that. And so here we are. Fast forward 2 years and everything has shifted, and I'm excited to serve still female entrepreneurs, but those who believe and just really care about God being the center of it all.
I think that's something the Lord is stirring in a lot of our hearts. I'm sure he's probably stirring it in his sons too. But since I'm really focused as well on female Christian faith-based entrepreneurship kind of stuff, that's where I see a lot of that. I definitely think it's something really important that the Lord's calling us into because it is, I think, a new thing that he's preparing and kind of going to birth from this process. And I think we just don't know the fullness of all of that. But I love that you're looking to bring glory to the Lord in everything you do and the women you work with and cultivating that in your community and with your women. Yeah. And so how does that look? What have you built out and how are you serving these women in that way?
Yeah. So the first thing I decided to do is really simplify my offers. And so, for many years, I've done a lot of different things post online memberships with networking. I posted in-person events. I've done retreats, masterminds, workshops, always bringing in guest speakers and experts to share on a topic. I've had one-on-one coaching programs, which that's been the thing that has really sustained me through all the years. And my love for coaching, I've just really focused on that. So I decided through all of this to simplify, because I did get married and we are trying to start a family. And so I just wanted a system and a business that allowed me space to spend time with the Lord. That's now a part of my work day, which sounds maybe a little crazy, but I get up and I get ready and I have my routine, but then I actually spend quality one-on-one time with the Lord. And that's the first thing I do in my work day, which is the most beautiful thing ever. And then that sets my tone for everything else that I do. And so I created this simplified business where I just offer one-on-one coaching. I call it my VIP program. It's the same program that I've had for a long time. It's just now shifted and focused to, Christian entrepreneurs, specifically Christian women entrepreneurs. And so I meet with them every quarter. I do monthly Bible studies with them. They have one-on-one access to me in between those sessions. I have a lot of things that get delivered to them via email and via text that are just curated content for them to encourage them, help them, challenge them to look at business differently, sermons to listen to, case studies to read over, books to read, that kind of thing. So just really getting them equipped. And so it's just this one program that I offer, and it's very simplified, but it's very beautiful. And then they all get to come together and do a Bible study once a month, which I love. So,
and that sounds like an incredible thing to be a part of too. But I also just so love the simplicity of it. And that is something that it's so interesting because for all the business coaching I was doing for years, I would teach that concept of niching down, super focused. But then I'd be running 5 to 7 different things myself.
Yep.
So I wasn't living it, but I knew in the words of how to do it, but I just was never doing it. And then literally it wasn't till this year that the Lord brought me here to Texas and started teaching me this process. And he's like, Heather, just one thing, go after the one with one thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know that concept.
I think it's difficult in the coaching world, right? Because there are so many opportunities, and I feel like diversification is needed when you're an entrepreneur. You're kind of afraid to put all your eggs into one basket, right? I don't want to just have this one thing because if it fails, then I need a backup plan, right? And so I do think there is that kind of that scarcity element to when we plan, especially as coaches, because we are dependent. It's a service that's not necessarily needed, right? It's not, it's kind of a luxury thing to hire a business coach, right? And to have them walk alongside of you. And so I think even the economy these days, with the economy being so scary, it's well, will people hire me? So we tend to jump to, well, let me have multiple offers. So that way I definitely have other income coming in.
So I can funnel people in. We get this. I literally was just talking to somebody about this the other day, but I was like, we either want to funnel people in or we want to tier them in. Yeah. We want to either create, and we think because we've been taught this in business for so long that, oh yeah, you get them into this program, then you elevate them into this program. And then and by that time, that person has spent so much investment with you. And then it's well, why didn't I just put them into this program in the first place? I could have accelerated them and got them the results really fast. And then they could be growing in that program, in a way that they could be growing. It's really interesting what you said with the scarcity element that keeps us from simplifying, because it's fear. We're afraid. And I think this is a thing specifically as well. And I'm not saying these things can't happen with men, but I think with women in particular too, especially if we're a woman running a business, especially if we don't have a husband that's funding us, behind us kind of thing,
right. Yeah.
Then we have this mindset, and then we get stuck in that mindset, and then we get into a relationship or a marriage or whatever. And now we're stuck in that overdrive of, I got to do all these things. I got to balance all these things. I've got to be the all encompassing woman, but it's that fear mindset that's still there, that need, that scarcity fear. And if we have the one thing, the one simplified thing, we can build multiple streams of income on that one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that the world's way of business is to think very scarce, very fearfully, very, like what if scenario. And it's the lack of peace, right? And it's very much the world's way. But I think the Lord, he talks about this kind of in the church. You all have your role within the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, that's what I've been doing the last couple of years is like, what's my role? Like I'm capable of a lot of different things, but what is the one thing that the Lord really wants me to do? And the longer I've been in business, the more niche down I've been able to get, because like just in the last 2 years, I just kind of watched the Lord take people out. Like at one point in time, I had a minimum of 30 people in my coaching program at one time, which was amazing. So I was coaching these 30 women. But then when I started making this, I had this realization that I needed to shift. The Lord started like pulling people, like people started to leave. They weren't going to renew. And then the people that were coming in, the new people were these, entrepreneurs that were women of faith. And so I just kind of like watched the Lord kind of weed out who needed to leave and bring me the women that I needed to serve. And so kind of like open hands, right, to whatever the plan is. And that when I started listening to the women that he was bringing to me, I realized that like they only need this one offer. And, I'm sure the Lord will come up with something else that I need to do to serve, but it's the same woman, the same person, like serving them. I think that's the important piece of it. And so I don't have to have the masses. I just have to have the ones he wants me to serve.
Yes. So I was just in a meeting a while ago and I was talking to some women about this, but that's what we were talking about, is that's what niching down means. It means just serving that one. And you have that one in mind every single time. Jesus had that one in mind every time. It was the one that is lost.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the one he's going after. And he'll leave the 99 to go after that one. And we need to have that same understanding of who is the one that the Lord is calling us to go after. Yeah. And what is the thing that's troubling them that we're going to help, that the Lord has already given us victory in. So we have this process and this path.
Yeah. I really believe God just wants us to be obedient to the calling, right? Like if we can just be obedient and stop trying to fix it or make all these grand plans, right? Like he will provide. I mean, if he called you to it, he's going to bring the people and the systems and the things that you need to make it happen, to fulfill it, right? Like he didn't call. Someone said this to me recently. He didn't put that calling on you or ask you to build the thing for it to remain empty. He wants to fill it up. He wants to bring the people in. He didn't, like, and the example was like, Noah. He said Noah build the ark. Noah just had faith and was obedient. And then he filled it up when it was time, right? And so I think sometimes it's just, we have to take that step of obedience and release whatever the assumptions are, or release whatever the world is telling us, because it looks different as a believer. It just really does. And anyways, I love this conversation we're having. Yeah.
It's easy to say, trust the Lord, when have our own strength around us. We're surrounded with all the things we created, all the things that are succeeding because of our own hand and our own strength. But if we come to that place where we're willing, and that's the thing, that's the key. The Lord wants us to be willing. Are you willing for me to burn everything out of your life and then to trust me? Yeah. And we're like, yeah, sure, of course. And then God starts burning it out of our life. We're like, God, where are you? Yeah. Are you going to show up? And he's like, yeah, but hold on, I'm burning it all out of your life first. Yeah. It's like, but you're burning everything out of my life. Yeah. And he does, but it's because he really wants to see us trust him. And then as we begin to learn to really trust him, and he gives us that clarity on the one, then we come into this place where everything, it slows down and then it gets really intentional. I've asked the Lord so many times, what is the thing you want me to do? And he's like, Heather, you aren't going to like the answer, because the main thing I want any of you to do is to know me.
I think that the big shift that I had at some point over the last 2 years was that it's all for his glory and not mine. It's, and I think, like I've been in this world for so long that I think I got don't say jaded, but I just kind of like, I started thinking like the world, like, hey, I got to build my influence. I got to build my name. I got to build my reputation. I got to get, it's all about me and the building of me and my influence. But really, it's all about the Lord when you're a believer. It has nothing. It's not about your influence. It's about his influence. It's not about, your abilities. It's about his ability through you. And so somehow through all of my faith being stirred, I started realizing like, oh, I wasn't positioned correctly. It wasn't about his glory for several years in my business, and so when I made that shift of, okay, God, it's for you. And he's, like, Lord, you're in control. This is your business. So I wake up every day as an act of surrender, not only because I crave to spend time with the Lord because he's my best friend and he's my counselor and he's my father, he's all of these things to me, but also he's the one in charge. And so the first person I want to meet with in my business is the one in charge. I want to know what the order of business is for the day, And so, yeah, it just has completely shifted. And honestly, to outsiders, this seems crazy, right? Like, and if you would have told Amanda 5 years ago about this, I would have been like, I don't think that's possible. I'm too busy. But the Lord, just like you said, he removed things from my life to make me have room for this focus on him. And I'm so grateful for it.
It's just so exciting hearing that in others. Yeah. I remember crying out to the Lord so many times, just, Lord, why is it so alone? Is it because I'm wrong in where I'm at? It felt wrong because it was so different from where we had been, and then God brings us into that place and it suddenly feels off. It feels wrong. And it's also so lonely. So it's like, how can this be right if I feel like I'm the only person doing it? We were connected so many years ago in Nashville. And then now the Lord has brought both of us through these wilderness experiences, and here we are, and he's connecting us again, but we're both in this new place of glory to the Lord is the ultimate, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So you've said this a couple of times, so I'm just going to be obedient, but Isaiah 43:18-19, it says, forget the former things from your past. Look at, I'm doing a new thing. There's streams that, are popping up in the wasteland. That was a verse that the Lord gave me, and probably it was a little before the 2-year mark where I'm starting to watch like the things I'm praying for, because that he gave me the verse and I was like aggravated at the verse. I was like, what do you mean forget the former things? And what do you mean you're going to do a new thing? Look at my life. I feel like everything's kind of in shambles. Like I have nothing left. I literally was in that wilderness moment going, Lord, I don't know what you're doing over here, but this is not where I want to be. This is not where I want to live. This is not how I want my life to go. Like I'm mid-30s freaking out going, what is this? What is happening? It's nothing like what I had pictured or planned for myself. Right. And so in that wilderness, though, he started having streams. That's the answered prayers. It was just like one answered prayer after another. And I was like, okay, Lord. And then things started being revived and changed, and things were being made new that I just honestly, I thought I would never get back. I had been married before. I thought I would never have a man who loved the Lord and loved me. And like, I just honestly assumed, Heather, that like I had made mistakes and I, kind of like screwed up, and that was just never going to be good for me again, that was going to be my punishment. But my new thing is a man who loves me, who has completely committed his life to the Lord, is fully surrendered, and is the most loving, wonderful man I've ever met in my life. And I'm like, Lord, I'm so undeserving of this blessing and these new things you're doing. And it's just because I think you really needed to strip me of everything so I could surrender and just be his first. And so, yeah, that scripture just is like one that I live by. And as you've been saying a couple of these words, I'm like, yes, this is what this is. This is like, you're in the wilderness and he's going to make things new.
Yes. And it's so beautiful to see too, because through those wilderness seasons we all go through, that is when the Lord is qualifying us for the things he's promised us.
Amen.
And in that season, though, we feel like we've lost everything. And like you worded it so well in saying that you felt like you didn't deserve it, that in fact, maybe you deserve to be punished for your choices. Yeah. And I've heard so many women say that they've thought the same things. Well, this is my lot in life. So it feels like it's going to be forever that we're in that place. Like it's never going to change. Like when you're in darkness and you can't see the light, or you're
Yeah.
in a hard place or a desert place, it feels like
Yeah.
you're thirsty and you want water, and you're not going to get it soon enough.
Yeah. It's hard to have
But
hope in those seasons, I think.
yeah. Yeah. But then even hearing your story and your testimony on that is so hope filled.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm so excited to hear that, because it is. And I mean, now you have an amazing man of God who loves you and
Yeah.
loves the Lord, and you guys can love the Lord together. And that is that's everything. That's worth everything.
Yeah, it is. And what's so ironic about it, Heather, like just where my life is today. So I was raised in the church. I was raised by, parents that were believers. So I was rooted in scripture and all of those things. And I remember when I was a young girl, I remember praying for the things that I have now. But
Wow.
at some point along the way, I just kind of thought, well, those things aren't possible, right? Like that was ridiculous for me to pray such naive things as a little girl. And so now, I mean, literally on our wedding day, I was writing a note to my now husband, which we just got married in April this year. And when I was writing it, I was just like, you're a million answered prayers. Like from the time I was a little girl, like the things I asked for that were so specific. The Lord has just been so intentional and fulfilling. Like for an example, so my husband who I married, he's also been married and divorced. Okay. And so he has a son with his, ex-wife, and he's an amazing father. And I remember, because I didn't have my father growing up, I remember praying specifically for a man who would be an amazing father. And here I am married to a man who is the most incredible father I have ever met. Literally, his fatherhood is so attractive. Like, I'm just like I don't even think there could be a better person at fatherhood. And he gets better every day. And I'm just like, how is this possible? And I can't wait to have children with him, because I just want him to be the father. I'm like, Lord, you have given me this answered prayer. Like, I know that you put all this together. And so just little things like that. There's such a long list when I was a kid that I was praying for. I wanted a man to love the Lord. Anyways, and just like even those prayers from when I was a little girl got answered through this process of, I made mistakes, and I ended up in the wilderness. I did a lot of sinning. I did a lot of stuff to kind of screw it up, but it took the Lord, I think, exposing all of that, helping me get to a place of surrender, having some sort of recognition that I needed to be dependent on the Lord. Because I think growing up in the church, somehow I missed that I was a sinful person, because I was a good girl, right? Like I did good things, but then I couldn't see my sin, because all I could see was the good that I was, right? And so anyways, the Lord just had to expose that. He had to reveal my heart's lost ways, and so I could get to a place of fully surrendering and dedicating my life to him in the biggest way. And so anyways, I think it takes an entire journey sometimes to figure it out, or at least it did for me.
Yeah. So just what you said in church, you seem to miss that part of what it means to be dependent on the Lord. I think so many of us have missed that. And I honestly, my personal belief is that a lot of churches are teaching things that are not right biblically. And it's messing up a lot of Christianity. And the reason I say that is because I work with so many women who are confused about things biblically that were the same things I was confused about biblically growing up in the church.
Yeah.
Because we're taught certain elements and certain things of what does it mean to prosper? What does it mean when God prospers you? What does it mean when he blesses you? What does the favor of the Lord look like? And then you look at Joseph, who was favored by the Lord, but he was also betrayed and sold by his brothers into slavery, and then falsely accused and then thrown into prison. And it was one thing after the other, constant attacks. How is that the favor of the Lord? And if we understood that at the level God wants us to, we would understand more when we come into these seasons where things are so difficult and so hard, that those are qualifying seasons. God was qualifying Joseph. He gave Joseph that dream, and Joseph knew the Lord gave it to him. He was so excited for it. And God gives us visions and dreams like he gave you as a little girl. This, and you're like, yes, and I'm writing that down, and I know this is what I want, Lord. And then all of a sudden you're going through life and you're like, wait a second, this is not what I asked you for, Lord, but it must be my fault because I'm a human and you're God. So, and then we just tear ourselves apart, but we don't understand we're going through that qualification process. We have to learn to be dependent on the Lord to this level of, and I think sometimes it takes so much time because we don't understand that we have to be willing to submit to that time. And so we have to fall on our faces a lot before we can get to that place where we're like, okay, Lord, I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to trust you for that. But in his time, God answers all our prayers.
You know, I think we have that battling, like growing up, you have this battling opposite conversation. You've got the one that's like, hey, you got to be surrendered to the Lord, which sounds easy, but isn't easy. And then you've got the other side of like, be independent, you know, build yourself up, build your career. You know? And so like when you are growing up, we all grow up in the world's ways. If you live in America, that's just what you do. You go to school to get educated. So you build your career and your experiences and your reputation. And then you make a name for yourself and, you know, but you're being taught to do it yourself and to not be dependent, really. Yeah. And then, you know, I feel like now I'm at a different place. I'm like, Lord, you want me to do this thing? I don't know if I'm really like qualified for this, but if you say do it, I'll do it. It's a different way of thinking. And like, you know, provide me with who it is that I need to go see so I can get qualified, or like equip me in some way. And he will do that, but it's all about his direction. And so I just don't think, you know, like maybe that I haven't had the honor of raising a child myself to know this experience. And maybe I will learn this as time goes on. But like, I just think we get conflicting directions as we grow up. If you're a believer and then also you're in the world. Yeah. It's just difficult.
It is. I think it definitely is about coming into his timing and being willing to submit to that. And I think that's why because we have these preconceived ideas and dreams in our head of how something's supposed to go. By this age, I'm going to be married. By this age, I'm going to have kids. By this age, I'm going to have a successful business. And then nothing goes that way.
I think, you know, I was at a point of, so this was back in 2020. This is probably my lowest point in my life ever. So I went through a divorce in 2018. In the midst of all of that, I invested in a business with someone who was a narcissist, and I just got trapped in a relationship that was really difficult. Like everything was foggy. It was sinful. It was wrong. It was worldly. It was just, and also that person claiming to be a believer. So like, just, you know, for me, checked a box that, hey, this is good. This is the Lord providing an opportunity, whatever. I chalked it up to, it was the right thing, but it was really about feeding my independence that I was seeking because of the season that I was going through, exiting my marriage. And anyway, so that whole business relationship left me bankrupt. I invested a bunch of money into it. I gave everything that I had. I, you know, trusted the scenario that was given to me, and it wasn't true. And at the end of the day, I was left with nothing. And when he was done with me, he was done with me. And so then I had nothing to show. And he was just a complete crook. And I learned a lot about business through all that. And honestly, it's one of the reasons I became a business coach and started pursuing it full time, because I just felt like people needed to be warned about like the real, like, awful business world that there really can be out there. Not all business is bad, but some business people are just really terrible. And so I just wanted to like warn people, equip people, teach people about, you know, how to be legally prepared and that kind of thing. But anyways, so in this lowest point though, like I had no business, you know, that I invested in, that was gone. I was filing personal bankruptcy because of all the investments that I had made and credit lines that I had opened for this business guy. And then I had no marriage. And when you go through divorce, you also lose a lot of your friends. And so I happened to marry my first boyfriend from high school. So we were high school sweethearts and we got married, been together a long time. We had developed all the same friends. And so all of a sudden I had very little friends, no money. You know, we had sold our house, so I really had no place to stay. I was just at this low point in my life. And it wasn't until then I realized all I had left was Jesus. And I was just like, Lord, what now? it was that breaking point where I said, I fully surrender. And that's when I started reading my Bible with intention, right? Like I'd always done it to check a box. Like I did my devotions, I did my quick prayer time, but I didn't walk with the Lord. I didn't seek to know and understand until this point.
It's just so beautiful to hear, because that I say that was my journey starting in 2018, which yours was in kind of beginning in 2018 too, which is interesting because I've heard so many women who share their testimonies where it's 2018, 19 is where the Lord really started calling a large portion of his daughters like into this wilderness transformational season with him.
Yeah.
But just that place of, I'll tell you more later because I've shared this too many times on my podcast, but I was in that place too. And it was just really, it's beautiful what the Lord does and where he brings us through, and that we can see that he has a process too. He has a way to bring us through, and if we're willing. So how can people, if they want to get a hold of you and your program and offers, like what do you have there and how can they find that?
Thank you, Heather. So I just offer one coaching program. It's called the VIP coaching program. You can learn more at amandamick.com. But really, just subscribing to my email list, I send out, and I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but I really just send out, business advice, biblical business advice. That's kind of what I'm all about these days, is like, hey, what can the Bible teach us about running our business? And how do we make decisions? How do we build relationships? How do we glorify God in what we're doing? And I just use a lot of scripture, to point people in that direction. And so, if you want just consistent biblical business advice in your inbox, go subscribe. There's a link on my website. That's really the best way to like get connected. And I'm trying to do more of these like podcast interviews to be able to share like my testimony and the growth and the change that's happening. So that really my hope is that people turn to the Lord and they also have this shift, because there's nothing greater. There's nothing more beautiful than waking up every single day and going, okay, Lord, this business is yours. It relieves some type of pressure. It just makes everything more exciting, and then also more beautiful and simple. And so, anyways, that's my hope for every single person that I serve and encounter and get an opportunity to speak to. So.
That's amazing. Yeah. Hallelujah.
Yeah. Hallelujah is right. To God be the glory for all the things that have happened in my life, your life, Heather. I love that he crossed our paths, I think actually at a podcast conference.
I was trying to remember the first time too, and I do remember I met you somewhere.
It was,
and then I tried to have you on as a guest, and I recorded an episode with you. The reason that episode never came out was because I was so nervous back then when I was podcasting.
Yeah.
And I was just starting doing guests on my show. I messed everything up. And I did it with multiple guests that I had on the show. And then I wouldn't launch the episodes because I'd mess it up so bad. And I was so concerned about what everything looked like and sounded like. And if it wasn't perfect, then I wasn't putting it out. But then I ended up coming to Nashville to a few of your events and stuff too. So,
I was thinking, I think that it was a podcast conference here in Florida, where I live now, in Florida somewhere. Either in Tampa or Orlando or something.
Did you have a women's prayer? We meet under the stairs to pray. Was that you?
No, I did do a women's meetup though. I did.
You did do a women.
Okay. I did. Because
that's how we met. Was that women's meetup?
Yes. I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know what year that was. I mean, that had to have been
2018, 17 or 18.
It would have been before then. I think, or maybe before then. Yeah, maybe like 17 or 16.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I love that we have been connected for all these years, and that this is the episode to release, right? Like this is the conversation that's divine in time. So
it's all about his timing.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for joining this conversation with us. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. For episodes, offers, or other guest information, please be sure to check the show notes. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.